To our participants too for coming in and testifying. I look forward to hearing what every one of you has to say about the process, the DOT process, the government process when it comes to getting dollars out the door to a lot of these important infrastructure programs. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Ranking Member Larson for his opening comments, and then to kind of give you the lay of the land on how this is going to work and the process.
Thanks, Chair Graves. I appreciate that, and I want to thank Representative Julie Brownlee of California and Representative Mark Salme as well of California for coming to the district today and hear from folks. I want to thank the Port of Everett for hosting today as well. In a previous life, I served with the Port of Everett, and I'm glad to be back. I'm pleased my colleagues have had this opportunity to see firsthand the world-class transportation infrastructure that we have here in Washington State's 2nd District, starting here at the Port. I want to thank the panelists as well for being here today to share with the committee how federal infrastructure dollars are benefiting our communities here in the Pacific Northwest. Congress delivers the top-line funding and guidance for infrastructure, but on its own, that does not produce results. The safety and mobility benefits of better transportation options, the jobs created, the economic impacts, and the shift for a cleaner future occur project by project and community by community. In Washington and across the country, much of the funding Congress has appropriated is now in the hands of state DOTs, cities, counties, transit agencies, railroads, ports, airports, the private sector, transportation workers, and tribes. Each one of you presenting today plays a critical role in building the transportation and infrastructure network that will serve our area for years to come. So we invited each of you here today to share some stories, share your perspective on how the partnership with the federal government, through investments provided from the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and other laws help advance critical projects. In Washington, every day is infrastructure day. I don't know if my colleagues have heard me say that before, but I know my constituents have. Today, $5.9 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law funding has been announced. It's headed to Washington State with more than 380 specific projects identified for funding. That includes federal funding for roads, bridges, roadway safety, airports, public transit, and major surface transportation projects. Joining us today is Snohomish County Executive Dave Summers, whose jurisdiction includes Seattle Plainfield International Airport, which has been awarded more than $6 million in airport improvement grants to prepare for expected growth over the next decade. I want to welcome Ms. Missy Napiahi, Vice Chair of the Salado Tribes and Sovereign Government, who serves more than 5,100 members, including 2,700 members residing on the Salado Indian Reservation just north of Everett. The Salados are expected to receive, the Salado Tribes are expected to receive $9.7 million in BIL funding to improve fish passage and $1.7 million to implement key elements of its climate adaptation strategy. Mike Harmon, the City Manager of Blaine, Washington, is here. Thanks, Mike, for coming down, all the way down from Blaine. A community that is home to roughly 6,000 residents on the U.S.-Canadian border in Whatcom County. Blaine was recently awarded a $9.5 million raise grant to begin to resolve issues at the Bell Road at-grade crossing. A lot of ads in this sense. At the Bell Road at-grade crossing that I first heard about 20 years ago when I was a freshman member of Congress. So it only takes 22 years to come by. Also joining us is Tom Morrow, Executive Director of Island Transit, the transit system that provides safe, accessible, affordable bus, paratransit, and van full service on Whidbey Island and Camino Island. And in June, WashDOT was awarded $7.5 million in a bus facilities grant on behalf of Island Transit for a new South Whidbey Island Transit Center. And last but not least, I want to welcome Commissioner Kathy Pittis from the Port of Anacortes, the Deepwater Port in Skagit County, where we will be in Skagit County a little later today. I look forward to continuing to work with Kathy and the Port to identify funding opportunities to improve infrastructure, create jobs, and keep supply chains and the maritime economy moving. The BIL is working in our state. It is not a set and forget it law, so we welcome any comments you have on your needs and challenges in the future as well. And one of my top priorities on the committee is to provide resources and tools for members to actively engage in shaping the outcome of infrastructure spending. By understanding the nuanced needs in their districts, members can assist local leaders to identify the most appropriate federal resources and opportunities and where to turn when issues arise. To that end, we do want to hear implementation your experience and experience in communities in all districts that will help our committee continue to work together on both sides of the aisle and build consensus for long-term infrastructure solutions. Working together in a bipartisan way is a priority for the TNI committee. In fact, despite all odds, last month the House passed a comprehensive long-term FAA reauthorization bill by a resounding 351 to 69 vote. Pause here for applause. I feel that. The overwhelming bipartisan vote exemplifies how Congress can put differences aside and focus on delivering for the American people. And in large part, it happened because Chairman Graves has shown some strong leadership and the partnership on that bill. And I want to thank him for that to help make the TNI committee island of partnership in NAC and partisanship in Washington, D.C. So I want to thank you, Chair Graves, for coming to the district and holding us. Great to see the turnout as well. I want to thank the members, Representative Brownlee, Representative Solomon as well, for coming in to participate today. And with that, I think I'm turning it over for a welcome.
Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, good morning and welcome to the Port of Everett. We're honored to host the Transportation Infrastructure hearing today. Some of you know, and for the benefit of others, the Port of Everett is a critical supply chain hub in the largest customs export district in the state of Washington. We're the 5th largest on the West Coast. Also, Everett is the premier break bulk seaport, and the region, the 3rd largest container port in the state of Washington. And we're proud of our recent designation as a commercial strategic seaport. This will look forward to strengthening our relationship with the federal government. Now, over the last decade, the port has invested over $160 million in our terminals. We opened our $57 million built-up and strengthened South Terminal International Seaport Terminal in 2021. And just last year, we opened our $40 million Northern Terminal, recovered from Kimberly-Clark. So these projects all are benefited from the types of federal investments that you're here to discuss today. And in addition to our seaport that serves America's manufacturing, we are the largest publicly operated marina on the West Coast. So as you saw coming in, there's a lot of construction going on. So this is pulling in, while you were pulling in, Port of Everett is an economic driver for the region, supporting a balanced waterfront where people can live, work, and play. And in Washington State, public ports are the tip of the spear for innovation, sustainable economic development, providing jobs and opportunity for our communities. And we're also diversifying our region's economy to be resilient against or planning for future economic changes. And I mean this sincerely. We are very thankful that you're holding this hearing today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate that. So I want to briefly explain how this field forum will work. We're going to go around the table, and each participant here will get approximately 5 minutes. Now, in a hearing on Capitol Hill, you get 5 minutes and 5 minutes only, and then things start to happen, and you don't want those things to happen. I imagine the chair will have a little more flexibility here if people go over 5 minutes. But during that time, I'd like each participant to introduce yourself and your organization's role, if you're with one, in addition to a few other remarks. Then I will start with a few questions, get us going, and recognize other members for questions as well. Again, we won't be timing anyone here, but try to So with that, Dave, good to see you, and right back for about minutes.
Thank you, Rick. Good to see you also. Chairman Graves, welcome, and representatives, thank you for being here. And to fellow folks from California who grew up down there, so it's good to see you. Welcome to Washington State.
Dave, can you get into the microphone a little bit closer?
Yep.
It's kind of bigger.
I always sound loud to myself, so I'll do it. And staff is conveniently supplied me with 20 minutes of comments, 5 minutes, so we'll submit written comments, and I'll try to be within my 5 minutes. But very grateful to have you here. We are a county of about 850,000 people. As you know, just north of Seattle. We like to think of Seattle as the southern gateway to Snohomish County. We're also home to 5 out of 5 active volcanoes in Washington State. We have one of them that's a glacier peak, so we're very proud of that. And we are one of the most trade-dependent counties in the country. 60% of our jobs and economy depends on trade, so obviously infrastructure and is really vital, and we very much appreciate all the contributions of the federal government to that infrastructure here. It's vital to us. We also have the second major east-west highway for Washington State, which is Highway 2, just to the east of here, which is a connection of I-5 across the country, so it's very important. And there's also a major railway, I mentioned I-5, Port of Everett, Hayfield, and SeaTac, the infrastructure here to the region is vital. I want to touch on 3 items, and this is a little rough because I did have 20 minutes of comments, so I'm trying to edit as I go. But I want to talk about Hayfield Airport, our roads, transportation infrastructure, and water projects. So first of all, Hayfield, I understand you're going to be out there this afternoon. Snohomish County owns and operates Hayfield Airport. It's home to the Boeing Everett plant. It returns nearly $60 billion to the economy each year. Very proud of that. SeaTac is just pre-pandemic. Hayfield was at $60 billion. SeaTac was at $20 billion. So we are the largest economic driver in terms of airports. And about 150,000 jobs really are supported by Hayfield. It's also going to be the site of the first sustainable aviation fuel research and development center. We've partnered with Washington State University and several global companies to develop this R&D center for biofuels. We know we're in a green transition in aviation, and we want to be a leader in that area. And we are at Hayfield going to benefit by approximately $16 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure bill to support a lot of activities. Some of those are reconstruction of a major taxi lane on the airfield in 2024. The second project is reconstruction of key hangars on our central ramp, and that totals about $4.25 million. We also are very proud to be the site of a new passenger terminal. I hope you get to see it, but it was developed by Propeller Airports, and developed in partnership with public-private partnership, excuse me. So, being a public-private partnership, privately owned terminal, we are not eligible for AIP funds. And one suggestion we have for you is, if you'd like to see more airports and air terminals developed this way, really. Was that oh no, you'll know when you're in here. So making public-private partnership air terminals eligible for AIP would be very valuable across the country, frankly. On the transportation of roads, Snohomish County has really benefited from the VIL. We've applied for funding for Highway 2 U.S. Trestle, which is across from Everett here going to east. We need about $1.6 billion to reconstruct that. It's an aging facility which needs replacement badly. We're also applying for funding for this our 522 interchange and widening project, which connects I-405 and US 2, which the process with permits more quickly. Our infrastructure projects are often held up through permitting process, and we support those agencies getting the resources they need to facilitate and streamline that process. In terms of water projects, our surface water management is replacing culverts through a NOAA grant program. We are doing watershed and estuary restoration throughout the county, and frankly could use more to assist in salmon recovery and worker recovery. We are a sub-grantee of the Toledo tribes for fish passage projects, require federal funding, and we are really looking at encouraging additional federal investment in shrimp salmon recovery and worker recovery. One additional recommendation, FEMA recently adopted a strict no-rise analysis requirement for floodplains, and that's really slowing down salmon recovery projects. So we support the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission interest in working with the Council on Environmental Quality to infuse more flexibility into their requirements on no-rise policies that help streamline recovery projects. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I will be happy to answer questions later. Enjoy your time here at Stone.
Thanks, David. Next, I want to recognize the Vice Chair, Missy Napiani of the Toledo Tribes. Thanks for being here, and you have approximately 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, and members of the committee. My name is Misty Napiahi, Vice Chairwoman of the Toledo Tribes. We thank you for this opportunity to testify today, and I would also like to welcome you to our ancestral lands of the Snohomish people. The Toledo Reservation is 22,000 acres located just 5 miles north of here. Only 60% of the land is in tribal ownership due to the allotment era, and the remaining land is owned by non-Indians. We have 5,230 tribal members, and we are the third largest employer in Snohomish County with 3,500 employees. In the 1970s, Toledo tribal leaders had a vision for the tribe's single largest remaining land holdings of 2,100 acres. Our leaders at the time were faced with a 72% unemployment rate and a growing population. I think you might have worked for us. Yeah. They understood that this land could provide future generations with the capability to conduct business and create an economic engine to support our tribe. Without foresight, they urged Congress in the 1970s to grant the tribe independent authority to enter into long-term leases on our trust lands so we could attract outside businesses and create a local economy. Those leaders were successful in this effort, giving life to their vision, and one of those leaders was my grandfather, Herman Williams Sr., who was 94 years old today. Starting in the 1990s, Toledo began investing significant human and financial capital into the I-5 access points, 4th Street, 88th Street, and 116th Street exits, leading west onto the reservation with federal assistance and tribal hard dollars. This investment was necessary to support economic growth of our tribe and also benefit the residents of the city of Marysville, Snohomish County, all those traveling the I-5 corridor. Today, that 2,100 acres is called the Consolidated Bureau of Colsita Village, an entertainment and retail destination that sees up to 10,000 guests daily, has created over 7,000 jobs for the region, and generates billions of dollars in spending, establishing direct, indirect, and induced economic benefits that have lifted the region's gross domestic product. However, infrastructure needs are not static. Today, Toledo priority projects are the 8th and 4th Street project, 88th and 4th Street project. The total cost of these projects is $63 million. These projects restructure 4th Street and 88th Street interchange to the east of I-5 to improve safety, reduce congestion for all those in and traveling through the region. We have applied for 2 BIL grants, the Reconnected Communities Grant and the RAISE Grant. Both applications were rejected. The main reason being we did not provide enough detailed documentation of our work with local jurisdictions, despite submitting letters of support from the lead officials at Washington State Department of Transportation, Snohomish County, Community Transit, and the City of Marysville. We have numerous other transportation projects listed in our long-range plan totaling $152 million. These projects are to build up the interior rural parts of our reservation that need roads, water, sewer, electricity, and internet to build homes for our membership. The money we invest on the I-5 interchanges takes directly away from the needs of our community. The only consistent funding we've had is approximately $1.3 million a year from the BIA Tribal Transportation Program. Tulalip also has numerous water infrastructure projects, including the Tulalip Water Pipeline. The water pipeline is an 8-mile large diameter underground water transmission pipeline from the city of Everett to the Tulalip Reservation, constructed and funded by the Tulalip tribes. The first 8 segments are complete, with remaining segments 9, 10, and 11 still needing funding. These will provide adequate water supply to the core of the reservation for the next 50 years and will serve over 30,000 Indians and non-Indian residents. Not only is the current water supply inadequate, but overuse of wells and groundwater withdrawal on the reservation is reducing stream flows, which directly impacts salmon habitat and growth. Back to what Mr. Summers was speaking about. We have received some ARPA funding. We have also been successful with IHS and other federal opportunities, we have not been successful with IHS and other federal opportunities. We have numerous other water and wastewater infrastructure projects that include rehabilitation of the existing wastewater treatment plant, which was built in 1975, water line replacement program for the aging infrastructure, and water distribution improvements for residents. The total cost of these projects is $30 million. There are little to no funding opportunities to fund these projects. If the committee is interested in future legislation for water infrastructure projects, we urge you to consider a travel set aside for reservation projects to upgrade and build new water and wastewater systems that serve both Indian and non-Indian residents. We're also in need of additional opportunities for road infrastructure. And we want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee might have. I would also like to invite each of you to our reservation to show you what I have discussed today, along with other successes and challenges.
Thank you very much. Next, I want to recognize Michael Harmon, who's the city manager of Blaine, who's sitting in for Mayor Mary Lou Stewart. I understand that if you could just pass on my thoughts.
Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, members of the committee, thank you very much for our opportunity to testify today, and moreover, thank you for the recent race grant award that the City of Blaine received. City of Blaine is a community of about 6,000 people on the Canadian border, and we're fortunate to have a railroad to our community that facilitates the transportation of both goods and people internationally. Part of the challenge with that railroad is that to protect national security, the trains must go through a system called VACUS. VACUS is, in lay speak, it's similar to what we would go through in the airports. It x-rays the trains and makes sure that cargo coming in and out of the U.S. is safe. What happens when trains go through VACUS is that the trains must slow down about 5 miles per hour, and that train blocks the intersection of 548, State Highway 548, and Peace Forward Drive. And so what happens is we can't get first responders over to the other half of our community, which is about 3,000 people, and then some of the greater Whatcom area, thousands more than that area. As Ranking Member Larson said, we've been identifying this problem for about 22 years and trying to find solutions, just haven't been able to afford any solutions. Ultimately, it was decided that the most affordable option was a signalization of that crossing. However, it didn't provide the safety that was needed to move both people and vehicles over that particular intersection. Thanks to the RAISE grant, for the first time, the City of Blaine has the funding to begin design on a grade separation at that intersection that will take, as I mentioned, both cars, people, bikes, etc., over that particular rail crossing, and also allow the trains to facilitate their movement and increase public safety greatly. Part of the challenges we see with this funding is access, just getting the funds to us. We have learned through federal highway that it can take up to 2 years plus to get those dollars in local hands. And so with construction inflation and just other things happening, it's really critical that we get those fundings in a timely manner. We're working with our partners at work, BNSF and FHWA, to access the funds quicker, but we ask for your help in getting those funds in our hands so that we can begin the important design work, land acquisition, and NEPA compliance that's necessary to facilitate the construction of that project. So again, happy to testify, happy to answer any questions you have, and we appreciate being here.
Thanks. Thank you. Next, I want to recognize Commissioner Kathy Piss, Port Van Forest. Thanks for coming down to another port and help us out.
Well, thank you so much. I know you've already had a lot of thank yous, so let me try to keep this to 4 minutes as my show in action of a thank you. So you are investing in us, right, with your time. A little brief overview of my port. Port of Anacortes is one of 8 naturally deep marine terminals here in our state. And we also have a marina, Thousands of Marina, which represents about 23,000 visitors to Anacortes and $10 million in local spending that happens. We have commercial properties and a general aviation airport. Most importantly, our port and all ports around the state are economic drivers for job creation and the movement of goods and services. And Anacortes is not different. We have the goods and services moved not only locally but also internationally as well. Think of us as just a little bit smaller than the Port of Everett. We are very proud and very mighty. Thank you again for passing the IL. We have waited a long time for a transformational infrastructure package, and we are pleased to see that ports and waterways are included in that. Infrastructure in and of itself is not partisan. It is beneficial to both sides of the aisle. It supports and creates family career jobs, creates national assets, and stimulates economic development and makes supply chains more efficient and business growth as well. Our 75 Washington State ports have and will benefit directly from PIDP. We heard earlier from Commissioner Bachman about the Port of Everett. You're seeing those dollars right now as far as build. There were $17.75 million that were invested in this $160 million project right outside this window. So again, you're seeing your dollars, our dollars at work today. So when you come back again, you're going to see those dollars from PIDP invested, and you will see the fruition of that. By example of recent PIDP awards across our state is the Port of Grays Harbor with $25.5 million, the Port of Olympia with $9.27 million, and the Port of Port Angeles with $8.6 million. The only reason you don't hear about the Port of Anacortes in that mix is we need a little administrative fix to be competitive. We feel confident that a GIS fix or a language fix is in the works. Obviously, if we don't get that and we're not successful, we will be gracing your door because we will need some congressional help with that. But what we plan on is our TDOC, our commercial TDOC. Accounts for more than 80% of all Anacortes seafood landings, and we average about $10 million of value in product coming across that dock annually. 6 tribes use the dock, and it facilitates $14.25 million in economic activity in our community. So, after that administrative fix, and after receipt of a PIDP award, we can talk about naming rights if you would like. In the meantime, we do need some help with Congress in regards to the permitting process. We've already heard about that, the rising cost of inflation in construction alone, what delays mean. Our last project took over 700 days to permit, and what we are trying to do is ask that perhaps T&I can go ahead and, work with maybe Natural Resources, the Natural Resources Committee, and other committees to propose meaningful streamlining in the process in a unified, holistic fashion. I understand that there's not going to be a sunset on these funds, but there will be a time when there's only so much funds available, and we want to leverage as much as possible the funding that's there. And what that means is matching funds from other local and state grants, which do have sunsets. And that's where the timing is so important with that permitting process, and that's where the ask goes out. I'll conclude with 2 additional thank yous, because I was always taught to sandwich my requests between those thank yous. But unlocking the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund is really important to ports. Thank you for that lift on that. Additionally, thank you for keeping the Water Resources Development Act on a 2-year cycle. This has directly impacted ports, and especially the Port of Anacortes, so we are grateful with that as well. I know with hearings you ask us questions, but I'll conclude to think about at the time when we get into Q&A, we would like like to know what ports can do for you. So that's my question to the committee. Thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Finally, Todd Morrow. Oh, by the way, T-Dot is a fine name for T-Dot. Don't need to change. Mr. Todd Morrow is the Executive Director of Island Transit. Thanks for coming all the way over from Whidbey Island to help us out.
So Chair Graves, Ranking Member Larson, and committee members, thank you for this opportunity to share about Island Transit. And present with me today are Island County Commissioners Janet St. Clair and Melanie Bacon, and also our other County Commissioner, Jill Johnson. Some background about Island Transit. The phrase in our industry, if you've seen one transit agency, you've seen one transit agency, could not be truer about Island Transit. We serve Island County, which, as you know, is across the bay from here. And our county includes two large islands. One, Whidbey Island, is the fourth longest in the lower 48. This longness and island geography significantly impacts our operations. To get to our other island, Camino Island, we must travel through two other counties. Island County has the most visited state park in Washington, with the iconic Deception Pass Bridge. We are home to Naval Air Station Whidbey Island and have a thriving agriculture, arts, and hospitality industry. 86,000 people call Island County home. For federal purposes, Island Transit is categorized as a rural transit agency, and we receive our funding through our state Department of Transportation. Island Transit has an annual budget of $20 million, a fleet of more than 60 buses, a staff of 130, 16 bus routes, and an operating base on each island. We provide traditional and on-demand bus service, paratransit, and van pool service. We connect people across our islands and to our transportation partners using the 4 gateways to our county. Tourists can leave their cars behind and visit our state parks using Island Transit. Everything we do is about equity and climate. Equity is improving access to opportunities, adding bus service, so that people can travel where and when they need to go. We're unique because at Island Transit, we are currently growing our service. In June, we began bus service on Sundays for the first time in our history. We expect to add more hours to the day to support those who work later once we hire more staff. We are also unique because we don't charge fares. We've been fare-free since the agency began in the 1980s. Our agency receives 70% of our operating revenue from voter-approved, locally collected sales tax. On the climate front, we have a population that's committed to decarbonization, and so is our agency. We have embarked on a 17-year plan to decarbonize our fleet. We will have a mixed hydrogen and battery electric fleet. We need hydrogen buses because they work on the long routes and are not dependent on an electrical grid that is susceptible to long power outages from storms. Federal dollars make all of this transition possible. We broke ground last week to install battery electric charging at our main operating base. We have on order 11 battery electric ADA accessible vans. We already own 5 battery electric sedans for our van program. We've installed solar panels on our 2 operating bases. Island Transit is now working with the Federal Transit Administration to build a transit center at the south end of our Long Island. We need a place there for safe, off-street transfers. In the latest round of bus funding, as you just heard, the FTA awarded $7.52 million for that project. We thank Representative Larson for that. Senator Murray, with support from Senator Campbell, has also included an additional $4 million in congressionally directed spending in the Senate's FY 2024 Transportation Appropriations Bill. As a board officer of the Bus Coalition, thank you, Representative Larson and Chair Graves, for your leadership as part of the Congressional Bus Caucus. Island Transit and the Bus Coalition supports funding the transit program at levels previously authorized. Also, efforts to plus up that funding as historic gains in funding are being used just to keep pace with the substantial increase in bus costs. Also, continuing the competitive funding programs that agencies like mine can receive the funding needed for projects like our South Whidbey Transit Center. Also, consider looking at Buy America waivers to make it possible to purchase a broad array of transit zero-emission vehicles while bus manufacturers story about one of Island Transit's riders. Martin immigrated to Island County from Uganda. He walked 9 miles to the ferry each day, which he took to the mainland for his construction job. He walked because he didn't know we were fare-free, and he was afraid that he couldn't afford any fare. One day, he injured his foot and was resting on his walk to the ferry. Someone stopped to help him and told him that he could ride Island Transit without paying a fare. That transformed his life. No longer did he have to walk to the ferry, shortening his commute time, making it possible to attend Skadden College to improve his life. Thank you for supporting our service that helps people like Martin.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you all for your comments. I appreciate it. We're going to move to questions now. I'm going to start, and then I'll turn it to Sam for the questions, and then Julia, Mark, and then Robert. But I want to start with Vice Chair I was struck by your efforts to get reconnect communities and raise grants, and you mentioned one of the factors of the US DOT came back and discussed with you about needing support from local communities, but you have letters saying you have support. What was the response from DOT, and were there other issues that DOT outlined that you can use to strengthen your application?
They said that they wanted to have meeting minutes from meetings that we had with the city of Snohomish, Council, Marysville, and everybody that gave us our supporting letters. They wanted to see agendas and meeting minutes.
And that was, is that, I suppose, did they say they also required that from other folks as well?
They did not.
One or the other?
Yeah.
Doesn't sound familiar at all. And then you said you have long-range plans for your internal roads. I imagine. Can you talk a little bit about the condition of the roads on the reservation?
Yeah, we have some roads that, for one, the Toledo Reservation, there's one way in and one way out. There's no other way, like if there was an emergency, we could get locked in. And so we wanted to punch a road through from Colsita Boulevard to the reservation to give us more access and to free up congestion that happens on Colsita Boulevard, which is 27th Street. We also have it's called the Union Cal land, and it was taken during the allotment era from a tribal family by Union Cal. We purchased it back in the 90s, but it's one of the high points on the reservation where in case of a tsunami or any natural disaster, it would be best if we were in that location. And that area is completely undeveloped with no roads, no access, no electricity. There's just really nothing there. And then the tribal transportation grant that we get from the BIA, $1.3 million a year, that covers about 4 different road projects a year. And we own hundreds of roads. And so I just want to make it clear for anybody who doesn't work with tribes, that we take care of you from the day you're born to the day you die. And what that means is your health care, your dental care, your housing, everything that you need is what we're trying to provide for your life. We are their government. And so when we put our hard dollars into the interstate, we paid out for 116. I think we paid $38 million in tribal hard dollars. That literally means kids won't get braces. Some people won't get the health care that they need. We have to take from one area to give to another, and we're trying to make that balancing work out. And that's why we promote tribal set aside, because when we have to compete with states, ports, counties, oftentimes we lose in that competition. You know, there's a lot of need everywhere. We understand that, and we would appreciate a tribal set aside so we don't have to compete at that level. Where I would say 98% of the time we don't get those grants.
Thank you. Todd, I'm sorry, Catherine first. You mentioned administrative fix. Could you explain a little bit? I think you're probably referring to the fact that the Port Manor Port, so there are 4 refineries in the district. 2 of them are up near the border, Cherry Point, 2 of them are in Portis. And the presence of the refinery means great paying jobs, great paying union jobs for a lot of has an impact as well on port applications for money as well.
You're absolutely correct. So 2 of those refineries are in our district, and so there's about 8 million tons of cargo that are attributed to the Port of Anacortes. And by example, our 2023 budget is closer to maybe 350,000 metric tons of cargo. So it skews, and what I might put it that's more simpler to understand, what we're having to compete in, maybe we're a farm league, and then we're having to compete in the major league because of the size. The Port of Bellingham was able to do a GIS fix with Cherry Point, so it might be as simple as that, or it could be some clarifying language very simply that can fix us. And we do feel confident at this point in time that we're going to pursue that on our own, but with too much time going by, that's why we talked about gracing your doors, because we want to be competitive to apply for some of these grants moving forward, and that's what we see we need to move forward.
To clarify, that the refineries aren't, are they already not included in the port specific property?
They are not.
They're not, but because of the fact that
Their proximity,
yeah, the cargo goes through, it gets counted as part of it.
correct.
So you look bigger than you are.
We look bigger than we are.
You're mighty.
We are mighty.
Be clear about that. One more question, for Todd. Can you talk a little bit about this transition to hydrogen and electric, especially as a rural transit agency, right?
Yeah, so we're planning to take about 17 years to do it. We did get assistance. Obviously, we don't have subject matter expertise on hand to develop a 17-year plan, but we hired out, got a state grant to help cover that. And as part of that analysis, all of our facilities were looked at, the unique geography that I described earlier, our weather, our needs. We wanted to design a system of zero-emission vehicles that met our needs and didn't inconvenience our passengers. And because of that, that's why a mix of vehicles is needed, not just battery electric, which does not have the range needed for some of our longer routes, as I mentioned earlier, Long Island. But also we need hydrogen, because those hydrogen vehicles do basically run the same distances as diesel. And so you don't have to stop and charge or have extra vehicles, which is a big concern. And we're very grateful. There's a low-no program, part of the Section 5339 funding that you all authorized, that is going to help us and every other transit agency across the country. We expect to apply for funding from that to help us as our buses age out to get funding to replace them with either hydrogen or battery electric buses. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. To ensure the full committee, they usually don't do this. He usually says, I'll turn to the ranking member of the full committee, but thanks for indulging me in my district, Sam. I appreciate it. Sam Grace, Missouri.
Thanks, Rick. And I have not so much a question as just a comment. And one of the things that the committee and we're trying to do is provide oversight for the dollars that are going out under the infrastructure bill. Because what you see is over time, as you get bureaucrats more and more entrenched, and they go from one administration to the next, to the next, to the next, is they try to rewrite legislation through rulemaking authority and through the rulemaking process. We're trying to streamline that and simply, it was brought up, a couple of you brought up permitting reform, which we have done. We've got a permitting reform bill or bills that we've incorporated into 2 or 3 different pieces of legislation under the Senate through Senator Manchin is working on a permitting reform process too. On our side, we're calling it one federal decision, trying to consolidate that permitting process into like one agency or going through one agency to do that permitting. But hopefully, we're going to see something happen there. Obviously, the Senate's their timeline is much different than the House timeline. It takes a lot longer to get things through the Senate, but we're hopeful we're going to see something there and be able to speed up those dollars trying to get out. If there was a question in that, and I know, Kevin, you kind of touched on it, but what problems are you seeing when it comes to working through that process, finding, getting the money? And I know, Michael, you mentioned it too, trying to get the money to you is an absolute headache. But I'd be interested in just hearing general comments comments on, those problems that you are seeing and how long it's taking, because inflation does factor into this. You come up with a project, you get an estimate, and then you work to get the dollars for that, and the next thing you know, you've got 2 years later, and the project's going to be third, and now what are you going to do? But I would be interested in hearing what you all have to say about the problems that you're running into.
Maybe just really quickly, almost every project that we undertake is going to touch a stream or wetland, river, coastal area, floodplain. And so there's a nexus with, as I mentioned, salmon, killer whale, bald eagles, etc., a number of endangered threatened species. So it's really the holdups we're seeing are in just being able to process through the natural resource agencies. That's why we really support funding for them. They can develop best management practices that then we can implement easily, but they have to have the staff and time to do that. And that's what we're seeing the bottleneck. And with those permitting agencies, we very much support their mission and goals. The natural resources are really vital to our economy and our industry and our quality of life here. So anything we do to assist those agencies to get their job done quicker will be helpful to us.
Thank you, Chairman. As I mentioned, after we received our award letter, we were on a webinar with Federal Highway, and they showed us the statistics of when we're likely to get our funding. And one of those statistics indicated that there's a 30% chance that it will take 2+ years to get our notice of financial obligation. So as a guy that brings this project across the finish line, I'm thinking, how do we take $90 million and make this work? I've got 2 years before we can start design, and then another 2 years to NEPA. So we've got 4 years just of paperwork before we can start construction on this project. Things start to add up real quickly. So giving those dollars either to the state or to the local units of government faster and trusting us to follow some of the fiduciary responsibilities we have through our own local guidelines or through state guidelines would be helpful.
So I'll speak to the permitting side specifically. So I don't want to exaggerate, it didn't take us 2 years, it took us a little over 700 days to get our last permit, and then when you add that on to then the funds actually coming, again, it just exacerbates the inflation factor there and our ability to leverage those local and state funds, because that's what we want to do with the dollars that you are generously working so hard on. We don't want our local and state funds to then sunset before we can ever see something come to fruition. So part of that permitting is twofold, right? They're looking at things on a case-by-case basis instead of looking at something in a more programmatic way. The other is we're having some issue with that mitigation as far as the calculator is concerned. I think people are touching on what it takes to get a project off the ground, and we are all committed to environmental stewardship. But I think when Congress can be the CEO looking at the competing interests of what needs to happen, to understand that no one's looking at something through a particular lens, somebody else is looking at something through the economic development or infrastructure lens. Someone has to come together and bring all those competing interests to one to understand what is legitimate moving forward to make things happen. We are credited if we're going to take out a creosote piling, for example, but then we are debited in that calculator because we're extending the life of a dock that's falling apart. In the end, that cost on that mitigation, we would like to see that looked at and a little bit more in-depth, because again, we are committed to what needs to happen for the environment that needs to be based on science and holistically looking moving forward. What does that mean? We understand that yes, it prolonged the life, but otherwise you're left with a dock that's not of any use, and is that what we really want?
Thank you very much. This is very interesting. Thanks for sharing. We appreciate it. When I was Mr. Summers, I was interested that you raised the sustainable aviation fuel issue. I
talking with Washington State University, they have a research lab in Eastern Washington on SAF. They pointed out that there is no single sort of repository or center for obtaining all the various formulations of SAF that are being created, and the industry is very much in flux. It's really in an early stage. So we are creating a repository and research center at Ainfield. We'll have the first version of that up and running by the end of the year. It's been pointed out that for really developing these fuels, there's a number of levels of tests. For the first test, you need about this much, and by the time you get to the fourth level of testing, you need thousands of gallons and things. So having a place where people can come to get these various formulations and test them or get them for testing, and having this repository was seen as a critical need. So we are doing that in conjunction with Washington State University, Boeing, and others there. So we really kind of hope to spur development and access by having this R&D center there. We will be looking for money for a more permanent facility, but again, we're committed to getting it up and running and just being sort of that catalyst for others to do their research and sort through this SAF. It's the plug and play in existing technology, graphic technology that can happen just as soon as the proper formulations are determined and people move on.
And there are research dollars included, some research dollars for SAF. Are you trying to access any of that?
We will be, yes, to complete the R&D center. Again, the first phase will be the repository, the small R&D, moving WSU is moving a lab over from there to that small scale, so we do see the need to expand that.
But you're not necessarily looking for production here in terms of SAF.
No, others will do the production. This would be, again, a repository, a central point for obtaining these fuels in R&D.
Great, terrific. And I'm not going to pronounce your name correctly, Ms. Nabiali. Nabiaki. Thank you for that. You talked about the challenges and disappointments, I would say, in terms of applying. You mentioned the RAISE grants. I'm curious to know, because those grants are supposed to prioritize tribal governments and low-income areas as well. And so I guess I'm curious to know whether the federal government was helpful to you in applying for the grants to, be able to help and assist to make sure that you have everything that's needed to have a fair assessment of your grant application.
So they usually offer us technical assistance if we need that. And I don't know if our grant writers looked for that technical assistance during that time. But what really, it was a really well-written grant. We have a really great grants team. And everything came down to minutes and agendas from meetings. And none of it was on what we were asking for. It just came down to really questioning our partnerships with our local communities. And so it was very interesting. And we have reached back since to see if there's any areas that we need to figure out, clean up. It keeps coming back to meeting agendas with minutes. So it really feels like the authenticity of what we sent in was being questioned.
Yeah, I think that's disappointing because, as I said, tribal governments are supposed to be a priority, and so I would hope that the federal government would actually be a strong helping hand to ensuring that those resources, get distributed the way we intended them to. Now, there's no question on the RAISE Act. There's such a much greater demand than there is supply of dollars. There's no question about that, and so that's a challenge. But tribal governments are to be a priority.
So just, I know you're from California, so I just want to give you a little bit of perspective. In this region, TLILIP is one of the driving forces throughout Indian country and throughout the state. And so we have a lot of resources to help us write these grants. So in our opinion, if TLILIP's not giving the funding, we don't understand it either, because we are very
Mark Salmier.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is terrific. When Congress started the Metropolitan Planning Organizations Act many years ago, at least as I read it, and coming from the Bay Area and having served in regional government in the Bay Area, you may not believe this, but the Bay Area, we looked at Puget Sound as being exemplary as opposed to, and I think for Los Angeles as well, Julia, you and Sandak actually. So what's their role? I've had a number of attempts in Congress to modernize MPOs to sort of fit this function as I read the bill and the iterations as we've gone through it, to coordinate the federal agencies, the state agencies, with the local agencies, with all the understanding of, and you've had these tensions in the Seattle area, just like the Bay Area has, good movement, industrial conflicts with suburbanization, commuter rail. So sometimes I think we're tippy-toeing around what we really wanted them to do was to work with you, but also work with the state agency and the government agencies so we don't get what Sam referred to as mission creep. But I wonder how that works for you here. How do the MPOs, maybe Dave, you can start, how does your MPO, and what do you look at for best practices in this changing environment? The changing environment for us on the West Coast, I was just reading 25 or 30% of the Pacific Rim trade because the relationship with China is now stopped, so I know it's affected the Port of Oakland quite a bit in my area. So maybe you just, how could we help with the regional coordination with the federal and state agencies?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I serve as Vice President of the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is our MTVO. It covers 4 counties: Kitsap, Pierce, King, and Snohomish. So we're the northernmost county of the 4-county region. Really encompasses the greater Seattle area. I believe our MTVO functions very, very well. It brings us together to prioritize our infrastructure investments and requests. It goes beyond that. The Regional Council also has a growth template, a regional growth template to help us make sure that we're connecting our centers, identifying our centers, and really investing in the entire region in an intelligent way. They have economic development wing also that helps. It looks at ports, looks at infrastructure, looks at our cities, and again our industrial centers to make sure that we're supporting them growing as a network. So it's a very strong organization. I think it has good relationships with both the federal government and the state government. So I don't have much in the way of suggestions, but I think we've had, it's going to be 30 years now, close to it, of practice working together in a cooperative way, and it really has been that in our region. So that's our situation.
And just a second question. I represent an area that's not dissimilar. Rick and I have talked about it. We have 5 oil refineries. We're transitioning. We were able to get grant flows and some of this through the Department of Labor and EPA and Department of Commerce to help local government transition. So maybe, Todd, you mentioned some of your transitional sort of at the point, but from well to wheel, trying to get this as near zero as possible, and then the impact on municipal government. So our 4 refineries in the county I represent, east of San Francisco, generate almost 50% of the property tax for school districts. Under our Constitution, half of the property tax has to go to the schools. So the challenges you have those are good paying jobs. A lot of them, the electricians we can transition, but oilmakers and different. So I wonder what you're doing here to work on the transition. You also have a very similar constituent group that wants us to change quickly to renewables, but the reality of making that transition in a thoughtful way has been a particular challenge for us in the Bay Area. I wonder if you have similar successes and challenges.
Absolutely, and we're following California's lead because obviously your state in terms of looking for answers, not saying we have the answers. And we're working outside our industry. There is an effort in Eastern Washington, for instance, a dam that has off-peak energy that's available that is planning on producing hydrogen that we hope to have access to. There is legislature that supports electrification. It's a huge concern. And so we're all just starting to come together, and many have been working on these things for years. It is challenging, but it's exciting, and we hope that we're creating a market so that there will be producers, and the cost will ultimately come down as the market grows. But it's about all of us working together. And I think the interesting thing in the transit world, like in many places in California, it's all about a mixture of hydrogen and battery electric.
Well, the infrastructure, the transmission lines, we have a number of bills that we've been looking at to try to help with that nationally. But the transition, I think, is particularly interesting because this is a huge thing. We're changing our energy sources from well to wheel in a relatively quick period of time. I just saw a study that said that over 50% of the cars in the United States will be alternative fuel cars, battery electric, or hydrogen by 2050. And the Chinese are more aggressive in investing in that. So it's interesting, the similarities, and I think we can do a lot on that on the oversight. Thank you.
We're getting here at the end, but I do have another policy question for Mike. Your border community and the U.S.-Canada border challenges are slightly the same, very much different than U.S.-Mexico border issues. U.S.-Mexico border issues. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what it means to be a border community here from a transportation perspective, out of the land port of entry, right there on I-5, plus the one, the commercial truck land port of entry about a mile east of that as well, and what that means for your particular challenges with transportation.
Thank you. So you're absolutely correct. We are a border community. Not only we're a border community, we're the third busiest truck traffic port of entry in the United States. There is a tremendous amount of commerce that flows from Canada through Blaine into Washington, and we're proud of that. Of course, you know, as a local community, that transportation has an impact on our road service, right? And a lot of times we're not collecting the tax for those trucks that are passing through our community. And so support for rebuilding and servicing that commerce is important to us. In terms of non-commerce impacts on the border, we do have a close working relationship with Border Patrol and Immigrations Customs, and their estimate is they're capturing a fraction of the narcotics and other things that pass through our border. And so that has an impact on our local law enforcement as well. And so any sort of support that you could provide to the city of Blaine, or that we can provide working closer with our federal partners to help alleviate some of their challenges and our challenges with both transportation and some of the, again, the drug traffic that flows through the border, it would be appreciated.
We know that the bipartisan institutional law included a program for GSA to fund improvements in land ports of entry and commercial truck, LPO, SUMAS, and within are all in line with $4 to improve the LPOs, LPOs.
That's fantastic and much appreciated.
Again, the timing issue, sure. I think we're near the end, and if I could offer to any of the panelists an opportunity to say what you remembered you wanted to say, or say what triggered something that you wanted to say as well, including the challenges or the homework that you want to give us, the additional homework you want to give the committee.
I'll just thank the committee for being here, and I think it's probably obvious to you that this is a vital region, but we know we are connected towards the rest of the country. I think we're all in this together. Infrastructure ties us together. So we are grateful, immensely grateful for the support. We can't do it alone. No local area can really fund the infrastructure for ports and highways and airports and things like that. So your role is vital, and as it is vital not only for us, but for the entire country. So thank you.
I too want to say thank you. As Executive Summers mentioned, we can't do it on our own. There is no way the city of Blaine can handle a $90 million grade separation in a community of 6,000 people. We just couldn't do it. And so through your work, we're also going to be able to leverage private funds through BNSF
seal issue. They're still protected under NOAA, and they're overpopulated our waters. They're the California seals. This is not their home territory. And they need to go home. Y'all can take them home with you. But they're eating all of our salmon, and in fact, they're greedy. They need to go home, and we need help. We need a lot of help. We need the laws to change so that we can start to save our salmon. And on the border issue, I just wanted to say there's an issue going on right now between all tribes in our Vancouver borders. There's a Jays Treaty that the United States formed with the Crown when they were under the British Kingdom. And we get to travel freely through the border with our tribal ID because those borders didn't exist. And so each of us, Tulalip, Lummi, Nooksack, Swinomish, have tribal members that live in our residents and citizens of Canada. And because Canada no longer wants to honor that treaty, they're not allowing our citizens to travel freely through the borders. And so I don't know if that's on your radar. It's called the DRIP, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of it because it is cumbersome for our membership to come home.
So I have a couple. I completely agree with the non-native predators in regards to salmon. I was on the governor's task force for orca whale, and so understand that. I think most people here do. It could also be a great revenue source for WDFW if they want to have permits go out for that, and I'd be first in line to get one. But aside from that, maybe something to ponder on your travels is we protect so much of our environment, and I'm not saying to take that away, but maybe a thought to protect what we have in our infrastructure. What we're finding in some of our ports is that you talked about creep, Representative, there is a creep because of our population and because of, unfortunately, some of the planning that has happened in our communities, that we have residential communities near our terminals. Anacortes, for example, has 12 miles of waterfront on Fidalgo Island, 12 miles of salt water. We have about 2,300 feet of marine terminal, and we have a tremendous pressure to curtail our operations. And those are competing interests there. It is important for our community to have not only tourists, obviously embrace what we have come to know as a quality of life on the environmental side, but we need jobs, and we need career family wage jobs, and those need protection. So something again for you to contemplate, is there something that could be done at a federal level to designate these important strategic ports, working, manufacturing, waterfront jobs, even when there's a transition from refineries to other sustainable fuels, those are still working waterfront jobs that need to have protection.
Thank you.
My second favorite transition, sorry, CJ. I'm going to turn it back over to Sam for a closing statement. Before I do that, I just want to, again, thank the panelists. And behind the panelists, you see an audience of folks as well who are representative of many of the cities and towns throughout the region, and ports as well throughout the region. The district I represent has 8 federally recognized tribes, Tulalip tribes being just one of them. We have cities represented here from farther north in the district as well. There are a lot of issues we didn't touch on. Skagit County is not represented in the panel, but Skagit County has a ferry system, the Weaver Island Ferry. It is transitioning to an electric ferry to replace a very old ferry as well, and they're using some federal dollars to help do that. And that's one example of some of the other dollars that are coming into the district. There's a lot going on. We're going to have a chance to see some of that at the Skagit County Airport today as well, and we'll be at the Boeing factory a little later, and we can ask some questions of Boeing, sustainable aviation fuel as well as the size of the building, the sheer volume of the building that you'll see. But I want to thank everyone. I noticed every day is Infrastructure Day. The president likes to say that we're in the infrastructure decade. It's like, I'll do it one day at a time. all one at a time. And we've also talked about the BIL being a once-in-a-generation opportunity. I'd like to think that this is a typical boring once every 5 to 6 years opportunity like Congress used to do it, and just kind of continually try to support transportation infrastructure consistently rather than waiting for the big deal to happen and just make it a routine deal that Congress does. And so you're helping us do that. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate Chair Grace coming out from Missouri and seeing what we're doing out here. With that, I'll turn it over to Sam for a closing statement.
Thanks, Rick. And the reason we do this is just so we can learn more about the problems around the country. And our districts are very similar. My district in northern Missouri is a very rural district, very agriculture district. And they're very similar to many of the same problems, maybe different problems as well. We don't have seal issues or whale issues in Missouri. We do have port issues. We have river ports on both the Mississippi that borders my district and Missouri. Rivers that border my district, but much different problems. But I just want to thank you all for providing us with some insight into what you're going through, and thank the Port of Everett for hosting this. And I want to thank Rick too for his leadership and his help when it comes to the committee. We are a work committee. We're not a show committee, and we have a lot of work to do. We have reauthorizations to take care of. We have to govern, while some of the other committees like to be on TV. A lot of the work that we do is a very boring, routine kind of things, but it's necessary and it's very important. We passed out our FAA reauthorization. We passed Coast Guard reauthorization, which our committee has full jurisdiction over our men and women in the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard itself and the many missions that they do. We have the Water Resources Bill later this year we will start working on, which is a water process. We have pipeline safety, which we're going to start working on when we get back to DC. So we are a work committee, and that comes from the partnership I have with Rick and the fact that we are a bipartisan committee. We get a lot of stuff done for that reason alone, and I couldn't do it without Rick. It's just